So tonight we're going to be talking about a suited house. So it's brand new suited. So there's obviously a couple different types of suited homes. We have brand new, we have older inventory, we have legal, illegal, bunch of different types of suited homes. But tonight we're going to highlight some of the brand new build stuff. So we're going to walk through the journey of what it's like to be a client and some of the things that we want to talk about. So for anybody who has ever been a part of a real estate investing course, have listened to podcasts, have simply, had an intake with one of the Mogul agents, one of the biggest things we talk about is our live well. And live well is kind of Mogul's term of your why. And Rebecca and I, we were talking about that property we rented for the main floor. And in the basement, we had a beautiful hoarder tenant that we inherited when we purchased the property. And I remember Rebecca being like, why the hell are we doing this? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, why? Let's just sell this place and what's the point? Because we have a kid, we both have full-time jobs. And you kind of go through this process of when things get really hard, it's easy to give up on the big reason of why you're doing that. And so when we have a buyer intake meeting with a client, it's super important that we really understand that live well or that why. What's the reason we are going through some of these steps, some of these adversities to continue growing? And that's one thing that we're going to uncover when we go through a buyer intake meeting. And the second, obviously, is criteria. So most people don't have unlimited amounts of capital. So we have to, build a case, build an investment kind of criteria for you. So this particular case, we're talking about somebody who is looking to create passive income and build long-term wealth. So I know there's a lot of things, but ultimately this was a couple in their 30s. They had 2 kids. Both had full-time jobs, and they really wanted to get something to start building some passive income and long-term wealth. Like I mentioned, they're young families with busy careers, so it was really, really important for them to not have something that's going to take too much time out of their busy schedules. Because they were from out of town, they can't deal with a lot of stuff that Rebecca and myself can deal with boots on the ground. They have to rely on property management. They have to rely on some of the experts there. So that was really one of the big things that we had to really ensure with their passive income side, and understanding that for them, it was more so for gaining back the time that they want to have with their family. So if we sell them a terrible house in a terrible location with a lot of repair and maintenance issues, what's that actually doing for them? Now they're going to deal with tenants. They're going to have to deal with repair and maintenance issues. They're going to have to deal with contractors. And that's actually going to take away, not give towards their live well. So in that process, we go through a couple transaction steps. So usually first it starts with kind of an intro call. We have a buyer intake meeting, and then we go through showings. So in this, especially for the Vancouver clients out there, people from out of town, showings can happen in a variety of different situations. If you're an out-of-town client, we have a couple different types of people, comfort, risk levels. Some people we typically recommend, why don't you come to Edmonton, rent a car. We're going to spend half a day together. We're going to go rip around the city. We'll give you a map. You can hang out, check out areas, especially when you're buying something brand new in a new community. Go there at nighttime. Roll down the windows, turn your car off, hang out, see what kind of people are in the area. Stop by the Starbucks, stop by the Tim Hortons, see the demographic of people hanging around in that community. That's our one type of kind of showing mentality. We have other people who, they're just going to rely on us. We're going to talk about everything. And then during the inspection, they're going to come and tour the property that we have under contract. And then at that point, they're going to get boots on the ground, understanding what they're looking at. And then we have the other end of the spectrum where people are going to come. Not at all. They're going to rely 100% on us and our expertise and the power team that we have to help them make that decision. Then we're going to move into our offer phase. We're going to negotiate something out, get it accepted, Then we move into conditions. And so our typical conditions or due diligence phase, we have usually two conditions on a normal contract. One is financing, and the second is property inspection. Once conditions are removed, or we go through everything, you get your thumbs up from your mortgage broker, you alleviate all the concerns with the inspection, there's no issue, you feel comfortable moving forward, we're going to get your condition removal, and then the fun part, possession. So in the search process, we have the type of property. So in this case, we talked a little bit about, I gave you guys a little bit of an insight of what we looked at, but in this case, the type of property that they were looking at was a brand new build. So they wanted to take advantage of builder warranty. So for people who've never bought a new build, Alberta has a legislation that you have to, as a builder, supply what they call 1, 2, 5, and 10-year Alberta new home warranty. Okay, so that covers you on kind of like a car. You know how there's like bumper to bumper, and then there's transmission and all these different things in different allotments. That's what they have on the new build side as well. They really wanted to take advantage of something that was turnkey, easy, that they could manage, and reduce repair and maintenance. Again, that was a huge, huge thing because, as you know, for any landlords out there, repairs and maintenance can take a ton of time. And then while you reduce that, you reduce your management kind of concerns, management time, all that stuff that comes into it. Second was location. The location is massive for tenant profile. So really want to figure out a location that makes sense. In this situation, they really wanted to target families. So amenities, schools, all the things that are important for a family. They wanted to keep tenants for long term. And usually when you got kids, you don't want to move. You got toys out there, you got everything, all set up. Your kids are in their school. That's what you really want to focus on, and having those long-term tenants. And then future growth. These were Vancouver people. They've been used to appreciation for a very long time. So they really wanted to target areas that had good appreciation. And so for us, Devin kind of mentioned it, looking for locations with future growth, infrastructure projects, hospitals, anything that you can think of that's going to really bring people to the location is really going to help with that. And their budget was under $550,000. So in our search process, this is the back end system. I don't know how, okay, you can see it pretty decent. This is the back end system of the MLS. So anytime that you have a search that an agent sets up for you, this is how they're going to go through it. So in this situation, if we were looking for this exact same property today, we have Edmonton, active, meaning it's currently on the market with no offers, single family, detached, and a secondary suite with a year build of 2020 and newer. There's only 6 options in all of the city that have that criteria. So right now, if you're looking for that, there's not a ton of options. The other options that we also have, going direct to the builders. We work with a lot of builders. We have access to their inventory. We talk to them constantly. And then we also work with some wholesalers trying to find deals off market as well. Okay, so showings. So this client was on the far end of the spectrum. They were busy with their kids, they were busy with work, and they couldn't come to Edmonton to look at the property. So what did we have to do? We had to focus a lot on making sure that they had a true understanding of what that property was. So we took videos, we took pictures, we put it in a nice little Dropbox. And you guys have all seen Selling Sunsets on Netflix? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So, when they show Selling Sunsets, do they ever talk about the negative parts of the house? I don't think I've ever seen that. Be like, oh yeah, that's look at that granite. That's, wow. They don't ever do that. But when we go through a property, of course, we're going to highlight the benefits of it, but it really is setting the expectations for the things that make sense while you're in the house. So we have to really, kind of pick apart the house. And sometimes it sounds almost so negative. I'm like, I don't know, would you even buy the house? And then you just talk crap about it the whole time. But it's really all about setting expectations so you have a clear understanding of what you're purchasing when you go through that. So that's really, really important. So the details on this specific property was a 2022 build, 1,700 square feet. It was 3 bedrooms up, 2.5 baths. So again, perfect size for a family. And one of the unique things that we found outside of a lot of the other properties was it had a 2 bedroom basement suite. And it is fairly unique to have 2 bedrooms versus one. And one of the things that during kind of the due diligence phase that we found is the 2 bedrooms had a lot higher rental rates than the single 1 bedrooms. Even though the bedrooms were smaller, people did find that there was a premium with the 2 beds, even if it had the similar square footage. And then obviously being Edmonton, people want garages. So here's a little highlight of the property. So beautiful looking place, close to a park, close to schools. Garage pad was poured. Things that we look for, things that that are appealing for tenants. We want to find really solid materials, so vinyl plank floorings, soft close hinges, separate laundry, all the things that you look for as a purpose-built rental. Those are the things that we want to see. So then next, we go into the analysis phase. So once we find a property, we take a look at it in the residential space. Really the biggest way to make sure you're getting a good deal is by pulling comps. So what we do is we take a look, we usually give a 1 to 200 square foot budget. So about 100 to 200 lower, 100 to 200 above. And then we say, okay, in this general vicinity and area, what does it look like? Are we on pace with what we offered and where we're at? So in this case, we had 3 properties, 3 solds, 520, 525, 525. And so we're like, okay, that's on pace. I think they're asking about 525, 530. But one of the things that we have a tool as agents in the background is if something sold back in the day, 6 months ago, what do we look at? Can we see and make sure that is it following market data and market stats? So this is what Devin mentioned. It's called the home price index. And this is what we call our price estimate. So if you bought this house and nothing changed, and you only purchased it from January to April, if you paid 525 in January, in today's market in April, it'd be worth 533,700. So again, it's not a foolproof tool, but it's something that we like to use to just kind of like make sure everything is identified and is looking good. Then we move into kind of the property performance page. So here are 2 scenarios that we went through. So especially as we're dealing with higher interest rates, people have to get a little bit more creative, whether you're putting a little bit more down, self-managing, and then we usually budget about 5% for repair and maintenance, but because it's a new build, you can budget a little bit less. So on this one, 2%. So focusing a little bit on the yields and focusing on the cash flow for the specific property. They didn't necessarily purchase it for what today's numbers are. And we'll talk a little about that further in a little bit. But it's something to keep in mind as you're analyzing properties. Don't just analyze what you think it's going to be today, but analyze what you think it'll be in 6 months or in a year or when that lease is up. All those things that Devin talks about in his market update, we really want to take and look and be forward-thinking investors, not just present-day investors. All right, and then the fun part. So we write, we submit an offer. Usually 9 times out of 10, they don't accept our first offer. It would be nice, but they don't. And then we negotiate. And then once everyone comes to an agreement, we put it on paper and we sign on the dotted lines. Then we move into our due diligence phase. So typically, like I mentioned, we have our 2 conditions. So we have financing and we have property inspection. During the financing phase, as soon as we get the documents, we fire it over to the mortgage broker. And so Keaton in the back, he's our mortgage broker on the power team. So fantastic guy to get everything done. And then we have our property inspection. So Pierre with overview as a very thorough inspector. And when we're taking a look at the inspection, and we usually have a 7 to 10 business day timeline on our due diligence. This is usually when you get your property managers out there, you have trades or contractors that you need to come out. That's what's happening. That's what you're doing. So when we were looking at, you guys can take a picture of this slide if you want, but a lot of times for like out of town investors, they want to know, where are you getting rents from? Where are you looking at the data? So these are typically in Alberta, the places that you'll find a lot of the rent information. So we have Rent Faster. Usually for me, I tend to find the best tenant profile on the site. They do make you they charge you for it. And that kind of eliminates a lot of the slumlords. And then some people don't really know about it. So I find it to be quite helpful. Facebook Marketplace, as Rebecca mentioned, you have so much interest. It's unbelievable. But how do you weed through it all? So you have great tenants, you have terrible tenants. So what we usually try to do is we'll send them like a questionnaire or something where they can answer. And then if they send it back and they actually take the time to fill it out, then we know, okay, these guys are serious. Maybe we'll engage in a conversation with them. A couple other ones, Rent Board is also great. Not as good as Rent Faster. They do make you pay for it. I don't find as many applications coming through on Rent Board. Kijiji is Alberta's version of Craigslist. We don't really use Craigslist. Kijiji used to be popular a couple of years ago, really finding the tenant profile to be quite challenging on Kijiji. You might find some good ones, you might not. CADmapper pulls a bunch of data and rentals from a bunch of different sites. So it's a good one. And then ForRent and rentals.ca. The reason I really like Rent Faster is you can get quite specific. So this property was in the community of Rosenthal. So we said, okay, let's go into Rosenthal, and then we're going to filter by 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, and pull up the map, and it gives you a list of everything in the specific areas. So it's really, really helpful to get a good sense of what's happening in that area. You pull up everything that's there. Okay, so pay attention to this slide. This is good stuff. So Devin mentioned CMHC. Everyone know what that is, that means? So that's Canadian Mortgage Housing Corp. They're basically Canada's housing agency, okay? So this is from the annual forecast, okay? And so they list out every single city in this report. This came out in March of this year, okay? So what they're talking about here is a couple things. So they have 2020, the last 3 years. They have new home market, resale market, and then rental market. So we have 2023, 2024, 2025. How many of you guys are landlords right now? Raise your hand. Keep your hands up if you have any vacancies. Okay, we have one guy. Well, maybe it's May 31st, so you got a turnover, right? So we had about 25 hands that went up, and only one kept their hands up. If you look at the vacancy rate, we were floating in the 7s for a number of years, and it sucked. It was you had to have about 6 to 8 weeks to find a decent tenant. You had all your rentals. I was using pretty much every site on that page to try to find good tenants. Now, like, we're renting places, so many people are looking at it, but look at the vacancy rate. Isn't that crazy? So we're about 4.3% right now. They're saying we're going to go to 2.3, and by 2025, in 2 years, we're going to go down to 1.3% vacancy rate. And keep in mind, guys, this is CMHC, so they're extra conservative on their numbers. They're not trying to sell you something. This is their forecast, and we're moving up from $1,390 to $1,610, $220 for a 2-bedroom. I've been waiting to raise rents, and we've been doing it the last 6 months on all of our doors. And usually we see a decent amount of people leave because they want to go find something cheaper. Not happening anymore. People are keeping the rent, even if you're jacking it up. And with us having UCP government staying in power, what people were concerned about was having another, being like BC or Ontario, where they're going to cap us on our rental rate increases. But being with UCP, I doubt that's going to happen. So we're going to stay kind of the Wild West when it comes to the landlord-tenant laws. So if we're again, I'm just going to highlight this for a second. If you guys are looking to buy investment properties, do you remember the time when things were crazy and you would go look at a house and they would be gone before you even got to the front door? That's going to happen in the next 2 years. Okay. And if you're looking and you're worried about how is it cash flowing today, these rental rates are going up. So if you're analyzing your numbers on today's rental rates, just know you can start increasing those rents to meet inflation, to exceed what we've already seen with interest rates and inflation. Okay, next we move on to the second part of the analysis is we got to make sure that these builders are not some fly-by-night company. So we look at Google, we take a look, see if they review, see if they look like legit people, and then we look at the Better Business Bureau if they do have it. So here we had an A+, which is great, and their reviews were fairly solid with about 36 people. Then the fun part, closing. So especially with out-of-town clients, we really want to make sure that keys are handed off, things are working well, and depending on how they're going to take possession of the property, whether they're managing it themselves, whether they're going to get contractors in there to do renovations, any sort of thing, we want to really make sure that we have a good grasp of what's happening. So it's all about extra communication, making sure that everyone is on the same page. And then last but not least, we move it into the closing and hand it off to the professionals. So in this case, they were hiring up a full-time professional property management company. So Libertas is awesome. They're a great property management company. If agents or if the clients are typically taking on the property themselves, then what they'll do is there's also a tenant placement company as well that we recommend. So instead of you hiring a full package property management company where they're managing on a monthly basis, they essentially do all the work. And that's what Rebecca and I do for most of our properties is we hire a tenant placement company that takes away all the advertising. They do all the professional photos for you. They post it on all the sites. And you basically say, hey, this is the criteria I'm looking for a tenant. They do all the showings. And then when they have a lease and an application, they say, here it is. Do you want to accept them? Do you want to do a phone call with them? And then they'll move them in to the property. So that's kind of the analysis of going through the property and going through the search. So any questions on that? Yeah, go ahead. So typically a full service property management company will charge 10%. That's on the residential side. And then on your commercial side, you're about anywhere from 5 to 8%, depending on how many doors you typically have. On the tenant placement side, they usually charge about $900 plus a couple advertising fees. So it usually ends up being about $1,000 to $1,100. Sometimes they'll charge like 1 month's rent. So it just kind of depends on what structures you have set up. Go ahead, yeah. Yeah, so the question was, do I use those two companies for our portfolio? So we have a combination of multifamily and then residential as well. So we do a combination of like commercial multifamily, property management company, and then we typically, like my wife and I, manage the other 50% of the doors using tenant placement. And then once the tenants are in place, we take over control. And we usually find that, again, if you're not dealing with repairs and maintenance too much, you're kind of just like handling it yourself. And the hard part, if you have good tenants, then it's not too bad. But I know we're at time, so I'm going to pass it over to a lovely host. Thank you so much, guys.